Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. My name is Tom Martinez, and I am 45 years old. I'm an irrigation system repairman in this drought-stricken town in New Mexico. It may not sound glamorous enough, but in a land where only cacti can grow unchecked, my job is like a wizard who brings life to the desert. 20 years ago, I met Maria. She's the daughter of the owner of the Mexican restaurant in town, with dazzling black curls and brown eyes as warm as a desert sunset. We fell in love, got married, and had our lovely daughter Rosa. Our life is not rich, but we call it happy and fulfilling. Until that hot July evening when everything changed. I finished work early that day to surprise Maria. I bought a bouquet of her favorite sunflowers. I'm going to take her out for a nice dinner, celebrating our 20th wedding anniversary. When I pushed open the door to the restaurant, my world collapsed in that moment. Maria is sitting in the corner with a man. It wasn't just any conversation. Their bodies were so close together, their smiles so intimate. When Maria saw me, her smile froze and a flash of panic flashed in her eyes. "Tom, what are you doing here?" She stood up, her voice shaking a little. I stood there, feeling like a fool, with the bouquet of sunflowers still clutched in my hand. "It's our wedding anniversary." I struggled to say the words. "I wanted to surprise you." Maria's face turned pale. The man, whose name I later learned was John, stood up and, "Hold out your hand to try to introduce yourself." But I've turned away. I drove out into the desert outside of town and sat in the back of my truck, staring at the darkening sky. Nights always come quickly in New Mexico, and the searing heat of the day is quickly replaced by coolness. I sat there, letting the night wind blow and thinking, what was Maria's relationship with that man? How long have they been together? Is our marriage salvageable? Countless questions swirled in my head, but I couldn't find any answers. When I got home, it was late at night. Maria sat in the living room waiting for me, her eyes red and swollen. Rosa was obviously asleep, and the house was awfully quiet. "Tom, we need to talk?" Maria said softly. I nodded and sat down on the couch across from her. The distance between us seemed farther than ever. Maria took a deep breath and began to explain. The man's name was John Graham, a wealthy real estate developer. He's in town to develop a new resort project. He came to the restaurant often, and that's how they met. "I'm in love with him, Tom," Maria finally said, with a slight tremor in her voice. "I want to be with him. I want a divorce." I felt a wave of vertigo, as if someone had punched me hard in the chest. "Are you sure?" I asked with difficulty. 20 years of marriage, and this is how it ends?" Maria lowered her head, tears slipping down her face. "I'm so sorry, Tom, but I can't lie to myself anymore. John can give me a better life, a life I've always dreamed of." I stood up and felt a surge of intense anger and pain. "What about Rosa? Have you thought about her?" "Rosa is 16 years old, she'll understand," Maria said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. I shook my head, speechless. Our marriage, everything we built together, was so easily thrown away. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Maria moved out to live with John, and I was left to deal with Rosa's questions and grief alone. Every morning I wake up and have to remind myself that this is not a dream. I threw myself into my work and tried to numb myself. New Mexico summers are extraordinarily hot, and ranchers are trying to conserve water by. There is a constant demand for improved irrigation systems. I began researching new water conservation techniques in hopes of doing something for this arid land. However, life always seems to have more blows waiting for me. A month later, I was served with divorce papers. Maria demanded an equal share of our property, including the small company we ran together. It almost killed me. Just when I thought life had hit rock bottom, I was approached by my old friend, local police officer Miguel. "Tom, I have something to tell you," Miguel said seriously. "About John Graham." I looked up and into Miguel's eyes. For some reason, I had a feeling that the next words would change my life again. "John Graham may be involved in water resources fraud. Miguel lowered his voice and said, "We suspect he's illegally mining groundwater. And there are serious environmental issues in his resort project, but we still lack hard evidence." I felt a wave of vertigo. Maria abandoned me to be with a criminal? What do you want me to do? I asked, my voice shaking a little. Miguel hesitated, then said, "We need inside information. Tom, you're the man for the job. Through Maria, you may have access to some key information." I was silent. On the one hand, I crave revenge and want to see John Graham get what he deserves. But on the other hand, even though Maria hurt me, I was reluctant to use her. "Give me some time to think about it," I'll finish by saying. Miguel nodded and patted me on the shoulder. "Don't stress too much, Tom. Remember, you're not alone." That night, I sat in my backyard and looked at the star-filled sky. The night sky in New Mexico is always especially clear, as if you can reach out and touch the twinkling stars. I think back to the night Maria and I first met. We lay in the desert, counting shooting stars and thinking about the future. Now, all those fond memories have turned into irony. My marriage was like a mirage in the desert, beautiful but illusory, disappearing in the blink of an eye. I took a deep breath and made my decision. I'm going to help Miguel investigate John Graham, not just for revenge, but for justice and to protect this land I love so much. The next day, I called Miguel. "I'd like to help," I said. "Tell me what to do." And so began an unexpected journey for me. By day, I'm a silent irrigator. At night, I became a secret investigator. I began to watch Maria's every move, taking notes on what she inadvertently revealed. It's a dangerous game, I know, but in the process, I realized that I was finding my lost self a little bit. I'm no longer the pathetic outcast, but I'm fighting for something bigger. However, fate always seems to have an unexpected twist. Just when I was fully engaged in my investigation, a woman named Amy showed up. Completely changed the course of my life. I started a double life. During the day, I'm still the quiet irrigator, repairing pipes, installing new systems, fighting the drought. But every night, I was gathering information for Miguel, an attempt to expose John Graham for what he is. It's not easy. Maria left me, but she still seems to feel a twinge of guilt. Every time we met for the divorce, she seemed uncomfortable. I had to be careful about what I said, for fear of arousing her suspicions. "How's John's new project coming along?" At one point I asked, pretending to be rambling. Maria's eyes lit up. "Oh, it went very well. He said it would be open soon. You know, this resort is going to be one of the most water-efficient buildings in the state." I nodded my head and laughed in my heart. If John really is illegally mining groundwater, then the so-called water conservation is just a cover. But even so, we lack conclusive evidence. John Graham is clearly a shrewd man who makes everything look good. Just when I was feeling frustrated, fate gave me an unexpected turn. It was a sweltering afternoon, and I was discussing a new irrigation system with a customer at a cafe in town. Suddenly, a woman walked in, and her presence seemed to breathe a breath of fresh air into the dreary air. She had short, sharp hair and was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. But the way he held his hands revealed an aura that was different from this town's. She headed for the counter, ordered a coffee, and then looked around for a seat. I found myself staring at her the whole time. When her eyes met mine, she smiled slightly and I felt my heart flutter. Just then, my client got up to leave. The woman saw this and came over with the coffee. "Is there anyone here, please?" she asked, pointing to the empty seat across the room. "No, have a seat," I said, trying to stay calm. She held out her hand. "My name's Amy, Amy Johnson. I'm an environmental lawyer who just moved to town." I took her hand. "Tom Martinez, irrigation system repairman. Welcome to our town." That's how I met Amy. In the ensuing conversation, I learned that she had come to investigate some local environmental issues. We talked about everything from New Mexico's drought to desert ecology to local traditions and culture. Before I knew it, it was already dark. We smiled at each other, both a little embarrassed. Time flies. Amy says, "Can we talk about this some other time?" I nodded, a sense of anticipation welling up in me that I hadn't felt in a long time. From that day on, Amy became a bright color in my life. We often met after work, sometimes at a cafe, sometimes in the desert outside of town. Amy has a deep love for this land. She always had a twinkle in her eye for the environment. Once, we were sitting in the back of a truck, watching the sunset over the desert. The sky was colored a brilliant orange-red, as if the whole world was on fire. "You know what, Tom?" Amy whispered. "This desert may look barren, but it's full of life. Every cactus, every grain of sand, tells a story of survival." I looked at the side of her face, colored gold by the setting sun. At that moment, I felt that something was changing in my heart. However, reality is always cruel. Just as I was reveling in the good times I was having with Amy, Rosa hit me in the face. "Daddy, have you forgotten Mommy?" One night, Rosa asked out of the blue. I froze. "Of course not, baby." "Why do you ask?" Rosa bristled. "Because you've been distracted lately, and you've been going out a lot. I saw you with that new woman." I realized that, immersed in my own emotional world, I had neglected my daughter's feelings. Rosa is in her teenage years, and I don't seem to really understand how devastating her parents' divorce has been for her. I took a deep breath and sat down next to Rosa. "I'm sorry, baby. I did neglect you a bit lately. But you have to know that no matter what happens, you'll always be the most important person to me." Rosa leaned over my shoulder and whispered, "I'm just scared, Dad. I'm afraid you'll leave me too, like Mom did." I hugged her tight. "Never, Rosa. I promise." At that moment, I realized that I needed to find a balance between my investigation, my new relationship, and my family. It won't be easy, but I have to do it for Rosa, for our future. At the same time, some progress has been made in the investigation. Through Maria's unwitting disclosure, coupled with Amy's environmental expertise, gradually, we've been able to paint a picture of John Graham's illegal activities. Based on the information you provided, Tom, Amy said to me seriously one day, "John's resort project is probably in violation of several environmental regulations. Not only is the groundwater being illegally exploited, but the local ecosystem may also be damaged." I nodded. "So what do we do next?" Amy pondered for a moment. "We need more evidence. If possible, it would be good to get their internal documents." My heart sank. Obtaining such evidence means that I may have to resort to more aggressive means. Not only could it be illegal, it could put me in danger. But when I think about how John ruined my family, how he cheated on Maria, I knew I had no choice when it came to destroying the land I loved so much. "I'll think of something," I said, with a firmness in my voice that was unfamiliar even to me. Amy looked at me worriedly. "Tom, promise me you won't do anything risky. Your safety is paramount." I smiled and took her hand. "Don't worry, I'll be careful." But I knew in my heart that the next move would be a big gamble. I may lose everything, but if I win, not only will I get justice for myself and save the land. On the way home, I called Miguel and told him about my plan. He was silent for a long time and finally said, "Tom, you have to realize that once you start, there's no turning back." "I know," I said, "but it's the only way." I hung up the phone and stood in front of my house, staring at the stars. The night sky in New Mexico was still beautiful, as if silently supporting my decision. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Rosa was watching TV and smiled with delight when she saw me return. "Daddy, you're home." Looking at my daughter's innocent smile, I vowed that no matter what the cost, I'm all about creating a better future for her. I know that tomorrow will be an important turning point. I may succeed, I may fail, but whatever the outcome, I have found a new direction in life. I'm no longer the outcast wretch, but a man who fights for what's right. This realization gave me a peace I had never felt before. I put my arm around Rosa and whispered, "Baby, let's watch some TV together." The night was deepening, but I knew the dawn was coming. That fateful night came sooner than I expected. I stood outside John Graham's office, my palms sweating. Maria tells me that John has an important business dinner tonight, and the office will be empty. This is my only chance. I took a deep breath and opened the door with the spare key I'd stolen from Maria. In the darkness, the office looked strange and dangerous. I turned on the flash on my cell phone and started searching for possible evidence. File cabinets, drawers, safes. I carefully searched every place where a secret might be hidden. Time passes by, and my heart beats faster and faster. Just when I was about to give up, I found an encrypted folder on John's laptop. With trembling fingers, I typed in John's birthday, which Maria had overheard mentioning. The screen flickered and the folder opened. Inside was an astonishing array of documents: records of illegal water rights deals, evidence of bribes to local officials. There are even plans to undermine the EAR. All of this is enough to keep John Graham in jail for the rest of his life. Just as I was about to copy these files on a flash drive, there were sudden footsteps in the hallway. My heart almost stopped. "John, are you sure the file is in the office?" It's Maria's voice. "Of course, dear. We'll get the papers and go." John's voice sounded a little impatient. I looked around in a panic and finally hid in a large closet. Just moments after the cabinet door closed, the office door opened. Through a gap in the cabinet door, I saw John and Maria walk in. John heads straight for the computer while Maria paces the room. "John, are you sure this is the right thing to do?" Maria's voice held hesitation. John sneered, "Don't be naive, Maria. In this world, there are only winners and losers. Which one do you want to be?" "But what if it's discovered?" "It won't. When the project is done, we'll get the hell out of here. Didn't you always want to live in a big city? Soon, your dreams will come true." I held my breath in the closet and felt a wave of vertigo. Turns out Maria was in on it. I don't know whether to be angry at her betrayal or saddened by her naivety. Just then, John suddenly frowned. "Strange. Why is my computer on?" My heart missed a beat. "It's over. I forgot to turn off the computer." John started checking the computer and soon realized the anomaly. "Damn, someone has touched my files." Maria panicked. "How can that be? Who could it be?" John's eyes scanned the room, finally coming to rest on the closet. I felt a chill run down my spine. Just moments before John reached out to pull open the cabinet door, the office door suddenly slammed open. "Freeze. Police." Miguel rushed in with a squad of cops. John and Maria were so stunned that they forgot to react for a moment. I pushed open the closet door and stumbled out. Everyone looked at me in shock. "Tom, what are you doing here?" Maria exclaimed out of breath. I smiled bitterly. "It's been a long time, Maria." The next scene was a mess. John is handcuffed and Maria cries out for an explanation. I, on the other hand, was pulled aside by Miguel. "Are you crazy, Tom?" Miguel lowered his voice and said, "Breaking and entering is a felony." I shook my head. "The important thing is that we got the evidence." Miguel sighed. "Well, I'll try to help explain. But you have to be prepared for the possibility of some legal issues." When the police took John and Maria away, I finally had a chance to catch my breath. I pulled out my cell phone and hesitated before dialing Amy's number. "Tom, what happened?" Amy's voice was laced with worry. "We did it, Amy," I said, my voice shaking a little, "but I might need a lawyer." Amy was silent for a moment, then said firmly, "Don't worry, I'll be right over. We face it together." Hanging up the phone, I leaned against the wall and felt a wave of exhaustion flood over me. That's all over, but the new challenges are just beginning. The next few days threw my life into chaos. Police investigations, media harassment, cumbersome legal procedures. Every day is a hard battle, but I'm not alone in this fight. Amy has always stood by my side, not only as my attorney, but as my moral support. Rosa is also showing maturity beyond her years. She stood strong against it all, even defending me at school. My dad is a hero. I've heard Rosa say this to her classmates. He's exposed the bad guys' schemes, protected our homes. I feel both proud and guilty to hear these words. I'm proud of Rosa's courage, but I also feel guilty for causing her distress. Finally, after weeks of investigation and hearings, the prosecutor decided not to charge me. Considering my role in exposing major crimes, they decided to give me a wide berth for my illegal behavior. When Amy broke the news to me, I almost cried tears of joy. "It's over, Tom." Amy smiled and said, "You're free." I looked into Amy's eyes and suddenly realized that, in the midst of this storm, I unknowingly fell in love with this strong and beautiful woman. "Amy, I whispered, "Thank you. I don't know how I'm going to get through this without you." Amy took my hand. "We're a team, remember?" Just then, I saw Maria walking towards us. She looked much more haggard, with remorse and pleading in her eyes. "Tom, can I talk to you?" she said softly. I gave Amy a look and she nodded, sensibly walking away. Maria and I stood facing each other, and for a while neither of us spoke. Finally, it was I who broke the silence. "Why, Maria?" I asked, with undisguised pain in my voice. 20 years of marriage. Is that so worthless to you?" Maria lowered her head, tears slipping down her face. "I was wrong, Tom. I was blinded by money and vanity. I didn't realize what true happiness was until now." She looked up with hope in her eyes. "Tom, can we start over? For Rosa, for our family." I looked at her deeply and thought back to the years we had shared. There was a time when Maria was the most important person in my life, the love of my life, my soulmate. But now, looking at her, I felt an inexplicable peace. "No, Maria," I whispered, "we can't start over. Some things, once lost, can never be recovered." A flash of pain crossed Maria's face, but she seemed to understand my decision. "I see," she whispered. "I'm really sorry, Tom. I hope you'll forgive me someday." Watching Maria's back as she turned to leave, I felt a wave of relief. It was a moment when I finally let go of the baggage of the past and was ready for a new life. I turned to Amy, who was gazing at me tenderly. In her eyes, I saw hope and a future. "Let's go home," I said, holding out my hand. Amy smiled and held my hand. "Okay, let's go home." The sun was setting, and we were walking home shoulder to shoulder. The skies of New Mexico are still as beautiful as ever, but this time, my heart is filled with a peace and anticipation I've never felt before. I know that this is not the end, but a new beginning. Whatever challenges lie ahead, I'm ready for them. Because this time, I'm no longer alone. Time flies and 2 years have passed. I stood in my own backyard, looking out at the desert in the distance, and recalled everything that had happened in the meantime. John Graham was eventually sentenced to 15 years in prison, and his real estate empire collapsed. Maria received probation for her lesser involvement, but her life became a mess. And I, once the plumber who was betrayed and lost everything, had an unexpected spring in my life. "Dad, come see." Rosa's voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned around and walked into the house to see my 17-year-old daughter excitedly pointing at the TV. "Your invention is in the news again," Rosa said proudly. A story was playing on TV about a new water-saving irrigation system I had developed. After that fiasco, I decided to put all my energy into what I really love. I began researching more advanced water conservation techniques in an attempt to do my part to help this arid land. Mr. Martinez's invention not only greatly improves water use efficiency, it also brings considerable economic benefits to our farmers. The reporter on TV was saying this. "This technology is considered a major breakthrough in solving the drought problem in the Southwest." I smiled shyly. "It's not a big deal. Just doing my part." "Don't be modest, dear." Amy's voice came from behind her. "You should be proud of yourself." I turned to Amy, a warmth welling up in my heart. Amy has been my strongest support for the past 2 years. Our relationship also deepened through shared experiences and eventually came together. 6 months ago, we had a simple and cozy wedding. Rosa served as a bridesmaid, and her big smile still lingers in my mind. Right. Amy suddenly remembered something. "Miguel just called and said he had a surprise for you. He asked us to come to his house for dinner tonight." I raised an eyebrow curiously. "Surprise? What surprise?" Amy smiled mysteriously. "We'll see." In the evening, our family arrived at Miguel's house. Miguel's wife, Laura, prepared a great Mexican dinner for us. After the wine and food, Miguel mysteriously pulls out an envelope. "Tom, remember when you helped us solve the John Graham case? Promised you a reward?" I laughed and shook my head. "Miguel, I forgot about that a long time ago. Besides, I'm content to do my part for justice." Miguel pushed the envelope in front of me. "Open it." Puzzled, I opened the envelope and inside was a check. When I looked at the numbers on it, I was shocked beyond words. That's too much, isn't it? I stammered. Miguel smiled and patted me on the shoulder. You deserve it, Tom. Not only for your contribution to the case, even more so because of what you have since done for our community. Your invention has helped countless farmers and brought hope to our land. I was so moved that I didn't know what to say, but could only hold Miguel's hand tightly. Amy came over to look at the check and said in surprise, Tom, with this money, we'll be able to spread your invention to more places. I nodded, already having a plan in mind. Not only can this money be used to expand my irrigation system business, funding could also be provided for promising young people to research new water-saving technologies. On the way home, Rosa couldn't stop talking excitedly about thinking freely about how we could use this windfall. Amy, on the other hand, gently held my hand with pride and love in her eyes. I looked out the car window at the scenery speeding by and was filled with gratitude. There was a time when I thought I had lost everything, but life gave me more. Not only have I found new love, but I've realized my dream of. Most importantly, I have contributed to this land and to the people I love so much. The next morning I arrived at my studio as usual. The sunlight pours through the window on the new irrigation equipment I'm working on, and it shimmers with hope. Just then, my cell phone rang. It's an unfamiliar number. Is this Tom Martinez, please? An unfamiliar female voice came from the other end of the line. Yes, I am. May I ask who you are? Mr. Martinez, I'm Professor Sarah Thompson from the Harvard School of Environmental Science and Engineering. We've heard about your accomplishments in water-saving irrigation technology. Would like to invite you to come to our school to give a presentation and share your experience. I was too surprised to say anything. Harvard? Me? Of course, we would also like to start further cooperation with you, if you're willing. Professor Sarah continued, your technology has tremendous potential value for arid regions around the globe. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself down. It's an honor, Professor Thompson. I'm more than willing to share my experience and look forward to a possible collaboration. After hanging up the phone, I rushed out of the studio, excitedly. Can't wait to tell Amy and Rosa the good news. Just then, I saw Amy standing in the backyard. A bouquet of brightly colored sunflowers was cradled in her arms. Rosa stood beside her with a happy smile on her face. Hey, what the hell are you guys doing? I smiled and walked over. Amy smiled mysteriously. There's good news for you. I raised an eyebrow. What a coincidence. I have good news too. You first, Amy said. I told them about the invitation to speak at Harvard. Amy and Rosa both squealed in surprise and gave me a big hug. That's great, Dad, Rosa exclaimed. I knew you'd be recognized someday. Amy kissed my cheek. I'm so proud of you, honey. Then Amy took a deep breath and handed me the bouquet of sunflowers. Now it's my turn for good news. I took the flowers suspiciously and suddenly noticed a small card stuck in the center of the bouquet. I took out the card and it had only 4 simple words on it. We have it. I froze, looking to Amy's stomach and then to her face. Amy nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I'm pregnant, Tom. We're going to have our own kids. I didn't know what to say for a moment. I just felt an unspeakable happiness welling up in my heart. I hugged Amy tightly, feeling her warmth. Rosa joined us in the hug. I'm going to be a sister, she said excitedly. The 3 of us stood in the backyard, basking in the warmth of the sun. The desert is still vast and dry in the distance. But in this moment, when I feel as alive as a rose in the desert, bloom tenaciously in difficult circumstances, what was once betrayal and hurt has passed and a new life is unfolding. I have a new family, a thriving career, and a new baby on the way. I looked into Amy's eyes and whispered, thank you for giving me a new life. Amy smiled and shook her head. No, Tom, you're the one who created all this. You're like a rose in the desert, even in the toughest of circumstances. It can also bloom in the most beautiful way. We smiled at each other and looked forward to the new life that was to come. I know that whatever challenges lie ahead, we will work together to overcome them. Because our love, like a rose in the desert, through the wind and sun, but more tough and gorgeous. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.